Happy Friday.
Happy Friday! Oh my gosh! Oh, look at that book on your bookshelf.
Look, no, and look, it's not a virtual background. It's real.
How
First day of
old's your
summer
son?
vacation. He is 9.
9. Okay, all
Yeah.
right. Mario Kart is still a wild world.
Yes, it is. And I don't play against them because I would destroy them every single time because I'm that good at Mario Kart. I we have a Wii that you used to be
Yep.
able to download old games on it and stuff, and we have original Super Mario Brothers. And I beat it in like 12 minutes every time we play because I'm like, let me show you how it's done, kid. Like the original Super Mario Brothers,
Yeah.
like
Don't you know where the extra lives are? Gosh,
exactly
kids are so
warp zones,
dumb.
coins, firepower. Like, come on, kids, let's get. And so they're always amazed. It's like, oh, of course, Super Mario 3. I get to the last world, and I'm like, I forget how to beat this. I have
I never
to,
got here before.
yeah. Legend of Zelda. We have Legend of Zelda on there, the original Legend of Zelda. My
Okay.
daughter and
Yep.
I
Yep.
did it together. That was fun. Like I never beat it as a kid, and I looked up. There's like a map guide on the internet of like what to do
Yes.
to get to every whatever, and it's like that's the way you do it. Is you just cheat. That's the only way to beat Legend of Zelda. So, but
The
hey, right
real question, Gil, is Mike Tyson's Punch Out. Have you downloaded that one?
I don't, and you can't download them anymore. I should have, but like the Wii store is closed because it's a Wii.
Okay.
They don't make Wii games
I
anymore.
I went through that Gen X phase where, I got the old original Nintendo and Super Nintendos right up here, actually.
Nice.
Um, and I had a phase after I moved back to Milwaukee. Like, I worked through Zelda, and at first I was like, I'm not going to use that map. And then after like 4 hours trying to find one screen, I was like, where's that freaking map? I am not
Yep.
doing this.
Yep. Because it's like, and I still have the tab open on my phone. It's saved as a like it's I don't I haven't bookmarked it. It's literally just the tabs left open because I know I can just search for it on Google again. I don't need to bookmark it.
Yeah.
But it's one of those like it's bulleted. It's like go right 3 squares, go up 2, go left 1,
Hmm.
burn the bush that's on the right hand side to get to a wizard. Like, okay, because I would have known that.
You remember how much time we spent burning bushes?
Yeah, right.
Leave the screen, come back, leave the screen, come back. And then when we found the blue candle and we could just burn incessantly, yeah, we were
Life
not
changing. Can
environmentalists in
we
that
can
world.
we start a new podcast where we just talk about 90s Nintendo games? Like, forget the admissions counselor malaise. Like, this is what people want to hear, right?
You know, if you want to pull a profession back from the deepest morale crisis it's been in, The Legend of Zelda is not a bad place to start.
No, it's not. It's not. How long do you wander around in the Legend of Zelda before you cheat on the map now, right? Like if you think about it, like my daughter and I, we started at day one because I pulled the Wii out of the attic and like plugged it in and like introduced video games to my children, which is a mistake in and of itself, but it's also a lovely bonding experience for us. And it was like legitimately when we went to Legend of Zelda, it had like the stored records from when we were playing it 10 years ago and gave up. And so now it's like, when do we start, like just start over? And so we did. We started from start to finish, original Link walking around. And it probably took us like a week and a half, 2 weeks to beat the game because we would play it in chunks because I'm not going to beat it all in one sitting with her. And then, of course, the time she goes, we beat the final boss, which I would have never been able to do without cheating. Like, no frigging way. We beat it. She jumps up. She goes to like tell mom about beating Zelda, and she trips over one of her brother's toys right into a table. And like that's the experience. That's like the memory. Like, oh, I tripped over Gil's crap. It's like why? Why want to make a positive memory?
That's the way it goes.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. So number one, you like Mike Tyson's. You like Mike Tyson's Punch Out. Any other? Is that your top video game, or do you have another?
I would say that's the one most burned in my memory. From the 80s, of course, it's Mike Tyson's Punch Out. It's the original Mario Brothers. And then there's just something powerful about Mario Brothers 2. It's not a fun game. It's
No,
not good, but I just can't I just can't quit it, you know?
that introduced the like floating peach character, right?
Yeah.
Like that was the that was the memory of me of Mario 2 was like, yeah, it wasn't a great, and like you get to the end and it's like, oh, by the way, it's kind of like the Marvel multiverse now. Like none of this matters because this game was a dream.
This was
But
all a dream.
but Mario 3 was like legit. That was the one that came with the Nintendo I got as a kid. Like you
Yeah.
bought you bought the Nintendo Entertainment System. And I feel like I got a Nintendo like the month before Super Nintendo came out. That's how long it took us to get a Nintendo. But it was like I was like, I got Super Mario 3. This is great. And then Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. That game was legit.
Remember that?
Swimming
Yes.
underwater and getting electrocuted by all the things, and like you have to turn off all. It was that was, and you cheat by switching your turtle halfway through. It's like how, in what universe would that work? But it works in video games. So it was that was a good game. That was a good game. X-Men the arcade game too. That was a good one.
Okay. All
X-Men
right.
the arcade game. The only reason that one is like top of mind is when NACAC was in Columbus a few years ago. It was the more than a few years ago at this point.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
a number of years ago when
I think seven. I think seven, Gil.
yeah, there was there there we've been around long enough where we're repeating cities now. So it's like which time when you were in Houston, which time when you were in San Diego.
Yeah.
But it's there was across the street from the convention center, there was a arcade bar that was like upstairs, and so long as you were either drinking a beer or eating pizza, you could play the video games, and there was no putting in quarters. You could just keep starting. And that's when I learned that like when there are no consequences in one of these games, and you can literally just fight Magneto.
Renew. Yeah.
It was just it removes you have to have a stack of quarters and run out of those quarters and be proud of how far you got, not just keep playing until you beat the game. That's just not, it's not fun. So it was cool to say I finally beat X-Men, the arcade game, at the ripe old age of what, 33, but it finally happened.
Do you know what could be helpful for because we have the Garcade in Milwaukee. It's a old arcade. Everything's on free play, and you just pay an entrance
Yeah.
fee, and you can stay all day, right?
Yep.
But you're right. There's no stakes. But even if they just tracked like you beat the game, it would have cost you $18 in quarters, right? Like just track it for
Yeah.
us, and then I'm in. Then I feel invested again because then
Yeah.
I want to know how much money did I save with this wristband, you know?
That's it. That's smart. And
We
it
got
probably would have cost me way more than $18 to beat X-Men the arcade game one quarter at a time. That was a long time. So you wrote a book.
I did.
You did write a book. Tell us
Yes.
about the book.
Well, the admissions counselor Malaise, Gil, I was so excited to like pull it together. It's it's doing two things. It's trying to conceptualize the challenge of staff morale in college admissions offices that has been so intractable since the pandemic. Um, and what helped me understand it better, and this is what the book tries to do, is I linked it to the challenge of 1950s suburban housewives. So a natural connection to make between 50s
Of
suburban
course.
housewives. Was it June Cleaver? Was that her name? Beaver's mother? Ms. Cleaver.
Mrs. Cleaver. There we go.
and and college admissions counselors. And what I try and kind of elucidate is the challenge of the staff morale crisis is not because of the pandemic. It's just aligned with the timing of the pandemic. But the actual challenge runs much deeper in how our profession has been changing over the course of a generation. And I use this rhetorical trick of touching back to, post World War II era Americana.
I think you make a great point that a lot of this, we like to think of the world in pre-pandemic and post-pandemic right now, and
Mhm.
one of these days that'll stop, hopefully.
Mhm.
But pre-pandemic, there were still overworked admissions counselors, challenged admissions counselors dealing with being asked to do more with less, being asked to travel while also reading applications. And I think what we did post-COVID for a little while there is we added in, you can no longer take a nap in your car between high school visits because now you have to be responding to virtual chats and sessions and whatnot. So we took out that little bit of, I don't want to say glamour, because sleeping in your car in a high school parking lot isn't really glamorous, but it's one of those like rites of passage type things that admissions officers kind of take pride in, of how much they're doing when they're traveling, and kind of fitting in that little bit of balance. This is a total aside, but this is a travel tip for admissions counselors out there. If this is your first year this fall, if you're heading out for your first year of travel, what I did one year, because I just wanted to see if I could do it, is I went to during my breaks in the afternoon between my visits and fairs, I would find a local Barnes and Noble, and I would go to that Barnes and Noble, and I would find a book, and I would pick up a book. It was like the first Harry Potter book, because I'd never read them because I'm a dork. And so I would read it for the hour that I'm there, the 40 minutes that I'm there, and then I have to leave to go to my next thing. The next town I'm in, 2 days later, completely different Barnes and Noble. I would go to the Barnes and Noble, find the Harry Potter book, pick it up, keep reading it. And that's how I read a whole book during travel season without having to buy the book. Now, some people go to things called libraries to do this kind of stuff, but there was a certain like rebel component of going to the Barnes and Noble and reading the book in the Starbucks area without like paying for it right now. So now all these people are gonna be like, yeah, Gil got a copy stain in a book in Trenton, New Jersey or something. But no, I was careful to treat that thing with respect. But all
Sticking with that admissions tip, host your coffee shop interviews at Barnes and Noble. So when the student no shows, you can keep thieving your book.
I prefer the term liberating the book, not thieving the book. But thank you.
Discover future applicants, delight enrolled students, and amplify fundraising performance with our Cadence engagement platform's live chat and chatbot solutions. Designed exclusively for higher ed by higher ed professionals, Cadence helps you engage your audiences with the perfect balance of AI and personal connection. We leverage proactive outreach and anticipate common roadblocks, knowing the most significant decisions often start with the smallest conversations. Our powerful AI ensures instant support and is smart enough to know exactly when to hand off to a staff member. And if nobody is available, it allows for easy follow-up. Effortlessly integrated with your website, we proudly feature an industry-leading 85% self-service rate. It's never been easier to make every message count.
So I one of the things I know we've talked about a lot over the years is that challenge of balance for admissions counselors. And I think we live in a world where, again, pre-COVID, people were, and pre-COVID, there was a lot more kind of face-to-face interaction with people and in-person type of things. And obviously COVID was an isolated thing, but like isolation was a big part of it. And now, with the advent of technology and CRM platforms, and more and more of a look at data as a driver of decisions, we're putting kind of these people between a rock and a hard place sometimes, right? We're asking them to do things that maybe they're not hardwired to do. Take the Enneagram personality test, or take whatever Myers-Briggs or whatever it is, right? You're asking people to be data people, and they're not always data people. They like to do the work. So how do admissions counselors today adapt to that expectation? But also how do you think leaders need to make adjustments to kind of accommodate for that misalignment?
Yeah, Gil, that's great. And there were two questions there. How do admissions counselors adapt, and what can admissions leaders do? The first part, how do admissions counselors adapt? Not well is the answer, right? That's our challenge. Is the staff morale crisis continues, and while all of society had a reckoning with our relationship to work after the pandemic, the problem is persisting uniquely, not just on college campuses, but in admissions offices in a different way. I do an annual survey of professionals out there. The morale crisis, we're getting used to it, but it's not getting better. The numbers haven't changed in the last year significantly. But admissions counselors, as more and more of their time is spent chasing through data spreadsheets in search of revenue for the institution, they're getting more and more removed from what gives them life and power, like what they love about this job, which is seeing the impact they're making on students' lives. It's the intrinsic reward that drew them to this work. So how are admissions counselors adapting? They're struggling. They're unhappy. Many of them are leaving, looking for different ways to kind of fill that need. What admissions leaders can do, there's two things, right? I really think it is an either or situation. You either find ways to alleviate the data diving you're asking every admissions counselor to do. I don't think every admissions counselor needs to know how to do a simple join, right? I don't think we all need to know how to really dig into the tables behind your CRM data structure. Someone does, but the admissions counselors don't. So you either need to find ways to take that off of their daily to-do list, or you need to hire different people. You need to hire data-minded people if you've created a data-minded job. The challenge I think we have, and what I was trying to draw attention to in the book, is the job has slowly changed. 20 years ago, when NACAC was in Milwaukee, right here in Wisconsin,
Yep.
admissions counselors weren't spending this much time on spreadsheets and in CRM data, and now they are. But there was never a moment where we went from not doing it to doing it this much. It has just been a slow evolution that I think kind of snuck up on us. The pandemic didn't cause the problem. The pandemic helped us realize what was wrong, kind of put some attention to it. But we've been trying to solve the problems as though the pandemic was the cause. The pandemic wasn't the cause. That was just a moment of realization.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And to kind of put a bow on the pandemic component to all this, right? Is we all it did was compound the issue and accelerate the issue in a lot of ways. So it felt like overnight we went from being in front of people all the time to being data jockeys, right, or spreadsheet jockeys. But realistically, that isn't the case. I mean, again, I remember as an admissions counselor, back in the day, we started adding things like social media. We started really implementing CRM platforms in earnest, right? This was pre-Slate, but there even CRM platforms that are as quote unquote impactful as Slate are still take management and support and coding and effort, right? And so you're really talking about a training issue, but again, it kind of goes to that point where do you force people to learn new skills for a job that they didn't really want, or you need to make adjustments to your hiring practices? And I think we're in an interesting time now, right, where you have this great resignation, and you have the aftermath of that at that kind of middle and junior level for many institutions. I talked to so many schools who are like, yeah, we've had this position open for a year and a half, and they keep the position open, but realistically, we're not understanding the why behind why it's not being filled. But then on top of that, and we mentioned earlier about what leadership can and should do, there's a lot of turnover at the leadership level as well, right? And, president to VP of enrollment to director of admission, those leadership roles are having changes also. So it's, there's, I don't want to call it a crisis, but it's almost a crisis of the vacuum of leadership that institutions are facing right now. And so aside from reading your book, what are things that they should do? But what are some things that tactical, tangible, actionable steps that people should take to really address this issue?
Yeah, this is a great question. And I put a lot of thought into it because I knew, any of us can identify, like, look at this problem over here. But inevitably, the next thing is like, okay, but so what, right? What do we do? And I think we have to find ways to address the daily tasks we're asking admissions counselors to do, which we've talked a little bit about that problem. But the other thing we need to do is return the sense of purpose to the position. And here's what I mean. The turnover at the president, the VP, and even the director level, I think has also created a crisis in intentionality and purpose for this work. And here's what I mean. Because the normal process, or the historically normal, right, the traditional process of elevation to leadership roles was accelerated with this turnover, things changed a little bit. As colleges are becoming more and more desperate for tuition revenue, and that was a significant change during the pandemic. Before those federal relief programs came in, it was existential for many institutions once they started sending students away and housing revenue back, etc. So I get where it happened, but that was a moment of sudden change where all of a sudden institutional revenue needs were much more critical than they had been even 6 months prior. And the new leadership kind of class, I think, has broken down some of the historical berms or barriers between institutional revenue needs and admissions counselors, right? I think the VPs of the past and even directors would kind of bear that burden, the like net revenue crunch, so that admissions counselors didn't need to think of students as net revenue dollar amounts. In the work that I do in a couple different ways, Gil, I've had one director ask if we can show admissions counselors the net revenue for each individual student in their CRM, right? Like put the dollar amount that this would bring to the institution, which is a terrible idea if you ask me, right? Like I think that is the worst thing. And because not only did we hire admissions counselors who are energetic, effervescent people and set them in front of spreadsheets, we've also hired folks who are mission driven. They're not here to meet sales quotas or revenue targets. They're here to help students. And the two problems admissions leaders need to solve, based on your question, which I think I got to in a roundabout way, is how do you change the daily tasks and return the purpose to admissions counselors? You change the task by taking that data mining process off of an admissions counselor's caseload and give that to someone who is really good at it and likes it. They will be happier, your counselors will be happier, and the outcomes will be better, right? That's one thing. And there's a number of ways to do that. There's vendors, there's AI, there's all sorts of kind of processes you can get there. But you can't ask admissions counselors to be just as good at spreadsheets and CRM data tables as they are working individually with families, because those are different skill sets. The other thing is admissions leaders need to find ways to celebrate moments of success with admissions counselors that have nothing to do with numbers, nothing to do with revenue, nothing to do with targets. So the way I ask it is, think for an admissions leader, think of any of your admissions counselors. Can they be wildly successful this year if they come in 20% under their recruiting goal? Can they still have done great work? And if your answer is no, then you've got to think differently about who you're hiring, because you're probably not lining with the kind of ethical underpinning of most traditional admissions counselors. They're not waking up every day thinking, how can I improve the budgeting situation for the political science department over the next 3 fiscal years, right? They're waking up every day thinking of students that they get to help. And admissions directors there's some superficial things they can do, starting every one-on-one by asking about some really cool students they've been recruiting, or touching back to students who are already there that counselor recruited 2 years ago. But just finding ways to be sure that the metric of success isn't only money and student numbers.
Grow your student community, help them stay, and encourage giving with Cadence, Higher Ed's premier engagement platform from Mongoose. Designed exclusively for higher ed by higher ed professionals, Cadence helps you engage your audiences with the perfect balance of AI and personal connection. Talk to students, parents, and alumni on their time and how they want. Empower your staff with integrated text and chat inboxes that gather all conversations in one place. Reach out to learn more about how our best-in-class service, support, and integrations have helped colleges and universities like yours have smarter conversations. From text to chat, make every message count.
I love the point you made about sales quotas and putting the dollar sign in front, because if it's a salesperson at a for-profit company, they're probably motivated by that indicator, because salespeople like to see, where can I make my quota and get my commissions the fastest, right? But that is not how admissions offices are compensated, or otherwise you would be hiring salespeople to work in these roles. But the challenge is that when we start using vernacular like leads and we start looking at things like conversion metrics, you're ultimately creating a sales job without those incentives of a salesperson. And there are many admissions counselors that get into sales jobs because they ultimately grow into understanding, oh, I'm good at articulating the value, I'm good at communicating with other people, and why not get a job where I can get more money by doing well for the company, right? Because that's by nature of how sales roles are organized. But you made a really good point that in admissions, the people that are in these not sales roles are more driven by doing good work, connecting with students, helping them to understand the opportunity in front of them. And so there's got to be this change in motivation. And I really like the suggestion around, talking for once about something other than the money for the institution. What about the impact that we're making? I had a student that enrolled from Ohio one year. It was the one student that enrolled from Ohio and I had gone there 3 years in a row. So you can ask tons of questions about the ROI on that investment over time. And obviously, but that student ended up graduating, ended up being a tour guide and being a student ambassador and going on to a PhD program in her field, right? And so, and the fact that now I'm old enough that I know that student is now a doctor when I recruited her that makes me feel good and bad at the same time. But it's, having that story element. The hardest part, though, and this is where I'll put my guy that works with ed tech companies, and I know salespeople that get so frustrated with admissions counselors and admissions leaders that are too busy to take calls and too busy to change what they're doing, is you do have that pushback of you put in all that effort for that one story, that one kid from Ohio. How many times did I go to Ohio and eat bad airport food just to get this one student? Was it worth it? And long tail, it was totally worth it from an impact perspective. But in the immediate term, when we are focused on net tuition revenue and ROI on our investments, budget, and we don't have unlimited resources or time, you've got to balance that, right? And so I think that's the hardest challenge for me is understanding how do institutions kind of balance that, because at the end of the day, you need the net tuition revenue to keep the doors open and pay everybody's paychecks and pay the lights, right? So what's how do we really create that sense of balance?
There is a sense of balance, and there is admissions counselors need to give a little bit on this one. So I'll say that because Gil, what you just said was admissions counselors aren't motivated by increasing net revenue. I would actually contend, I think sometimes they recoil at the idea that the more revenue a student is bringing, the more value they bring to the institution, right? Like that does not sit well with them. And I think we do need to help them move a little bit on that particular front. But admissions leaders, I would say this. Does it matter, like you have your enrollment targets, does it matter to you who fills those seats or just that you fill the seats? Because I feel like professionally, we've gotten to the point where, especially the demographic cliff is coming, things are tightening up post-pandemic. It is a situation of just fill the seats and then we'll figure out the rest from there. And that is not how admissions counselors think. To them, it does matter who is filling the seats. They don't think everybody should come to the institution. They think there are a lot of students that would come that wouldn't be well served and should go somewhere else. And they worry when they see their admissions leaders focusing and talking about revenue and metrics too much, that is driving the decisions more than students that they can help. So how to achieve that balance? There's a quote, I forget his name, but a former president of Quaker Oats. So this is an oatmeal reference, but back in the 70s, he said, and I'm paraphrasing only because I don't have the quote directly in front of me. He said, a corporation needs profit the same way humans need food to live. Of course, it's necessary, but you would hope your purpose is bigger than that. Your purpose of living is not to eat, right? Your purpose of being a corporation is not to make profit. You need it to live, but hopefully you're doing something different. And admissions counselors are living, they're spending their time in the broader purpose, the bigger purpose. And we will do better by our admissions counselors if they see their leaders reflecting that purpose back in all aspects of their job as well. The measuring of success, the ongoing monitoring. Admissions leaders, the whiteboard of numbers on the wall behind them, that's good. We do need to watch it. And admissions counselors are not naive to the fact that we have to hit revenue targets or the institution finds itself in a challenging situation. But we have a bigger purpose than just that. And I think we've not focused on that as much as we used to, and I think that's what's causing a lot of the challenges with our staff.
I think I could not have put that any better myself, and I feel like that is the lasting lesson that I think we need to impart to our listeners and to the community as a whole. So, Teege, I appreciate you spending the time to be here today, and all the work of putting the book together for our YouTube viewers. I have it awesomely displayed in my background. The book is the Admissions Counselor Malaise. Teege, I appreciate you being here, and we will see you next time on FYI. Bye.
Thoughtfully nurture applicants, personalize retention efforts, and exceed fundraising goals with our Cadence Engagement Platform's text messaging solutions. Designed exclusively for higher ed by higher ed professionals, Cadence helps you engage your audiences with the perfect balance of AI and personal connection. We leverage an intuitively designed interface and easy-to-use texting templates so you can have targeted conversations or scale up to expand your reach. Our powerful smart messaging can respond automatically, exactly how you would. And to measure progress, track your campaigns with unparalleled reports and analytics. Effectively meet your community where they are as we proudly feature an industry-leading 95% read rate within 3 minutes. It's never been easier to make every message count.